During the early days of the American Civil War, as the Union scrambled to organize its forces, a fierce group of volunteer soldiers began to emerge from the western states of Wisconsin, Indiana, and Michigan. These men were different. Tough, resilient, and deeply patriotic, they would go on to form one of the most feared and respected units in the entire Union Army, the Iron Brigade. Originally known as the Black Hat Brigade because of their distinctive tall black Hardee hats, they quickly earned a reputation that would strike fear into the hearts of Confederate soldiers. But their rise to legendary status didn't happen overnight. It began with a deep sense of duty, unity, and an unwavering will to fight for the Union cause, no matter the cost. In 1861, when President Abraham Lincoln called for volunteers to put down the Southern Rebellion, these Midwestern men stepped forward without hesitation. Most were farmers, blacksmiths, teachers, and laborers, ordinary citizens with no formal military training. Yet what they lacked in experience, they made up for with unmatched determination. These weren't just soldiers. They were men fueled by a moral fire. They believed in the Union, and they believed that slavery had to end. That belief gave them an edge on the battlefield, an edge that would become their signature. At a time when most Union regiments were still trying to find their footing, the Iron Brigade set themselves apart through sheer discipline and unity. They trained harder, marched longer, and followed orders with razor-sharp precision. Their black hats and neat uniforms became a symbol not just of pride, but of terror for Confederate troops. Wherever these men marched, whispers followed. "The black hats are coming." That phrase alone would shake enemy lines. As stories of their fearless charges and unbreakable defense spread like wildfire, their first test came at the Battle of Bronner's Farm, where they faced off against Stonewall Jackson's elite troops. Outnumbered and under fire, the Iron Brigade stood firm. Despite heavy losses, they refused to retreat. They fought like men possessed, with a fury that even Confederate generals had to respect. This battle, though costly, marked the beginning of their transformation from a group of volunteers to an elite fighting force. It was here that they began to earn the name Iron Brigade, a title reportedly given by General George B. McClellan, in recognition of their iron resolve under fire. What made them truly unique was not just their courage, but their cohesion. Each man trusted the one beside him with his life. That bond turned them into a wall of iron on the battlefield. They didn't just fight for their country, they fought for each other. And that spirit, that brotherhood, would carry them through some of the most brutal battles of the entire war. The origins of the Iron Brigade are not just a tale of military formation. They are a story of unshakable loyalty, relentless grit, and the making of legends. From the cornfields of Wisconsin to the bloody fields of Virginia, their journey was just beginning. The Iron Brigade wasn't just a name, it was a symbol of unmatched bravery, earned through fire and blood on some of the most brutal battlefields of the Civil War. After proving their mettle at Bronner's Farm, they quickly became the go-to unit for the Union whenever a position had to be held at all costs or when a breakthrough seemed impossible. Their legacy was forged in moments of chaos, where most troops would break and scatter, but the Iron Brigade would dig in, hold the line, and fight with a fury that seemed almost inhuman. It was this relentless spirit in battle that made them not only respected but genuinely feared by Confederate soldiers. One of the most defining moments for the Iron Brigade came at the Battle of Antietam, the bloodiest single-day battle in American history. At dawn, as fog lifted off the fields near Sharpsburg, Maryland, the Iron Brigade launched a fierce assault through an area known as the Cornfield. It looked peaceful, almost serene, but within minutes it became a slaughterhouse. Confederate bullets tore through the stalks, men fell by the dozens, and yet the Iron Brigade pressed forward. They fought with bayonets, rifles, and raw determination. Despite staggering losses, they smashed through the Confederate lines, shocking even their own commanders with their unshakable courage. Nearly 800 of their men fell in that single morning, but they held the ground. They didn't flinch. That was the Iron Brigade. Their legend only grew stronger at Gettysburg. On July 1, 1863, they were among the first Union troops to arrive. As Confederate forces advanced, the Iron Brigade charged into McPherson's woods and clashed head-on with some of the South's toughest regiments. The battle was savage. Smoke filled the air, trees splintered under cannon fire, and bodies fell like leaves in a storm. Outnumbered but undeterred, the Iron Brigade fought with a terrifying efficiency. They pushed back seasoned Southern fighters, capturing flags and prisoners in the process. But the cost was immense. Over 60% of their men were killed, wounded, or missing by the end of the day. Still, their stand helped buy the Union the precious time needed to form strong defensive lines that would ultimately win the battle. What set the Iron Brigade apart wasn't just their effectiveness in battle, it was their refusal to retreat, their ability to endure unimaginable pressure, and their willingness to sacrifice everything for the cause. Confederate soldiers began to recognize their tall black hats even from a distance. That single detail sent a chilling message. The Iron Brigade was here, and things were about to get ugly. Stories of their battlefield heroics spread like wildfire. Across camps, newspapers, and even enemy lines, they were more than warriors. They were symbols of the Union's determination to win. Every charge they led, every hill they held, every loss they endured carved their name deeper into Civil War history. The Iron Brigade didn't just fight in the war, they defined what it meant to fight with honor, grit, and an unbreakable will. There was something different about the Iron Brigade, and it wasn't just their fierce combat reputation, it was the way they looked, the way they carried themselves, and the aura they projected long before a single shot was fired. Unlike most Union troops who wore standard blue kepis and uniforms, the Iron Brigade marched into battle with tall black Hardee hats, crisp dress coats, and a level of discipline that made them instantly stand out. These black hats weren't just fashion. They became a symbol, a warning, and a badge of honor. Confederate troops began to fear those hats because wherever they appeared, brutal and unrelenting battle was sure to follow. The uniform of the Iron Brigade told a story before any words were spoken. It wasn't flashy or ornamental, it was practical, sharp, and intimidating. Their black hats towered over the battlefield, giving them a distinctive silhouette in the smoke and chaos of war. At a time when most soldiers looked alike, the Iron Brigade's appearance set them apart and made them unforgettable. This image, combined with their deadly battlefield performance, earned them nicknames like the Black Hats and the Bloody First. To Union soldiers, they were heroes. To the Confederates, they were nightmares in black, but the uniform was only the surface. What truly defined the Iron Brigade was their unmatched discipline. These men weren't career soldiers, they were Midwestern volunteers, everyday citizens who trained harder, drilled longer, and held themselves to standards even some generals couldn't meet. They marched with purpose, rifles clean, boots polished, and formation tight. Their camps were orderly, their routines strict, and their morale incredibly high, despite the horrors of war around them. This discipline translated directly into battlefield dominance. When chaos erupted and other units faltered, the Iron Brigade held their ground like stone. Their sense of identity wasn't just about pride, it was about brotherhood. Every member of the Iron Brigade felt a connection to the others that ran deeper than uniforms or flags. They knew they were part of something greater, something legendary. Wearing that black hat wasn't just a matter of dress, it was a mark of belonging to an elite force, one that carried expectations of courage, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty. Even new recruits felt the weight of that legacy the moment they put on the uniform and the enemy noticed. Confederate officers began to recognize them on sight. Reports would often note the presence of those black-hatted devils, and strategic decisions were made based on whether or not the Iron Brigade was in the field. Few units in the entire war had that kind of psychological impact. Their look alone could shift momentum before a shot was even fired. The Iron Brigade didn't just wear uniforms, they wore a legacy. Their appearance became a mental weapon. Their discipline an invisible shield, and their unity a force that even bullets couldn't break. They didn't have to announce who they were, one look was enough. Everyone knew the Iron Brigade had arrived, and everything was about to change. As the Civil War dragged on and the casualties mounted, Even the Iron Brigade, those black-hatted warriors of the Union, began to feel the weight of war. Battle after battle had thinned their ranks. The men who once marched proudly in perfect formation were now bloodied, battle-worn, and haunted by the faces of fallen comrades. But their spirit never broke. Even as fresh regiments were folded into their ranks to replace the dead and wounded, the legacy of the original Iron Brigade lived on. They had already become legends, whispered about in both Union and Confederate camps. And by the end of the war, they weren't just seen as elite soldiers, they were icons of Northern bravery and sacrifice. When the guns finally fell silent in 1865, and the Union stood victorious, the Iron Brigade had already paid a heavy price. They had one of the highest casualty rates of any unit in the entire Union Army. Out of thousands who had once worn the black hat, only a fraction returned home. But they didn't return quietly. These men, forever changed by what they had endured, were welcomed back not just as veterans but as heroes. In towns across Wisconsin, Indiana, and Michigan, the stories of their valor were told and retold. Children grew up hearing the names of Iron Brigade soldiers like General Solomon Meredith and Colonel Rufus Dawes, men whose courage on the battlefield had helped shape the outcome of the war. Yet their legacy didn't fade with time. Memorials began to rise in their honor. Books, articles, and later films would tell the story of their epic stands at Antietam, Gettysburg, and Bronner's Farm. Historians praised their discipline, their resilience, and their unmatched loyalty to one another. Civil War enthusiasts today still visit the very fields where they fought and bled, retracing their steps and trying to understand the sheer intensity of what they endured. Military academies study their tactics. Reenactors wear their black hats with pride. And their name, the Iron Brigade, still commands respect. More importantly, their story became a reminder of what ordinary people can achieve when united by purpose. They weren't superhumans. They were farmers, teachers, clerks, regular Americans who stood up in a time of crisis and became extraordinary through sheer grit and unity. Their bravery continues to inspire soldiers, students, and storytellers alike. They showed us that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about standing firm when fear is everywhere. The Iron Brigade's legacy is etched not just into history books, but into the very soul of the Union's victory. They stood when others fell, they held when others fled. And they proved that even in the darkest hours, honor and determination can light the way forward. If you found their story as powerful and inspiring as we did, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more gripping historical stories, and share this with anyone who appreciates the bravery of those who shaped history. The legacy of the Iron Brigade deserves to be remembered, and now you're part of that mission.